Hello and welcome to today's session. We have a really exciting topic here to talk about, and we're talking about the intersection of application development and AI. I'm joined today by Scott Hebner. Scott, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It's really, really exciting. I mean, I get into a number of conversations in the app dev practice here at theCUBE and the conversations we have across app dev. It's really, really exciting. The show's been on that I've been going to. A lot of discussion around how AI is going to take over the world. It's going to take over people's jobs. It's going to, there's not going to be any developers left in the world. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think developers have a long way to go, and a human in the loop is going to be there for quite some time. What are your thoughts with AI and the impacts of application development?
No, I think your observation is 100% right. It's not about replacing human beings. It's about giving them superpowers. I think is the notion here, right? How to get people to be more productive, more creative, more innovative, get things done faster, make better decisions, problem solve. And I think we're on this path here where we're evolving from the world of, generative AI, task-based AI value, if you will. 2025 is likely to be about agentic AI, where you start getting into decision-making, and then agentic systems as that kind of evolves, and these collaborative agents that partner with human beings to do even more, complex things like planning and orchestration of how teams work together. And I think we're seeing rapid innovation cycles on both the app dev side and the AI side, and the intersection obviously starts to fuse together even more as we go through time here. So it's going to be a really interesting year in 2025, I think.
I absolutely agree. And, Scott, when I think about the conversations I have with organizations, I talk to CIOs about what their initiatives are, and app modernization is top of the list, right? They want to modernize their heritage applications, move them into a new modernized approach, and they're looking for ways to do this that's going to be most effective for their organization. Skill gaps tends to be an issue, complexity tends to be an issue for these organizations. But what we're seeing with regards to AI is, I'm making some early predictions here, Scott. I don't know if it's going to go through, but I'm kind of feeling like this is what's going to happen. AI augmented development initiatives are really going to struggle when it comes to scale, right? We're going to see that at least, organizations are going to attempt to replace 50% of their developers with AI systems, and they're probably going to fail by doing that because they don't think that those systems are going to be powered or with the right tools that's going to help help those assisting the developers with automated and repetitive tasks like code generation, debugging, or testing. But they really need to have that human in the loop. What should developers care about when they hear about, 50% of the jobs are going to be replaced? Is that really going to happen?
Yeah, no, again, I just don't buy that. I think it's going to be about giving people superpowers and then evolving to giving teams of developers, app dev practices, if you will, organizations, collective superpowers, and people are going to get things done better, faster, more creatively, and you're going to be able to do more. I don't think anyone's going to say, well, we want to do less and therefore, or do the same and therefore just replace people. So I've never really bought into this notion that, especially in a very, let's call it intellectual profession where there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of human creativity that's involved in application development. I just don't see it replacing people. I mean, clearly there's other roles in the industry outside, of IT, inside of IT, but that could be automated and maybe replaced, like order entry or things of that nature, but not a profession like this that is all about creativity. I think you're going to see this evolution from where we are today in terms of the intersection here, where AI is helping developers automate tasks. And we can talk a little bit about that. I think it's going to evolve next year and probably 2026 into helping developers make better decisions and problem solve and have better explainability and understanding and trust in what all this AI stuff's helping them do, which is a quality statement, I think, right? And then I think from there, it evolves into the organization, right? How do you plan? In other words, you take AI agents for app dev and you augment them with human beings. They become part of the team, but their job is to help orchestrate communications and collaboration across different parts of the app dev lifecycle and again, you get into this world of problem solving and decision making, right? And making sure people are in sync from an individual perspective into an organizational perspective. But I don't see any of that like replacing people.
Yeah, Scott, I agree. I mean, I think that there's definitely a need for a human in the loop. However, I do think with the skill gap issues and the complexity issues that organizations are running into, there's going to be, I would predict by the end of 2025, what we're going to see is more of these organizations, probably more than half of these organizations, are going to abandon the managing those best of breed DevOps tools in favor for a unified platform. They're going to look for the streamlining approach to having a unified platform with the consolidation of DevOps tooling into this platform, basically with the need to reduce the operational complexity, streamline workflows, improve integration, as well as allow for organizations to accelerate delivery cycles without increasing overhead. What we're seeing in our research is basically we're seeing that 24% of respondents indicate they want to release code on an hourly basis, yet only 8% can do so. And the only way they're going to get to this productivity and increase of software delivering cycles is to utilize operational efficiency tools like AI. So Scott, I know we're working on a research note together here. We're putting some content together. The data is coming together, and I really, for the audience to stay tuned for that or follow up on that one. But I think that the reducing complexity is definitely an area. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that's where the world of agentic, right, comes in, or AI agents, because they can help be the connective tissue, right? Because what's nice, an AI assistant essentially is it automates a task, like a code generation assistant. It can help you automate, at least get started, maybe 30-50% of the code that needs to get developed, but a human still needs to go in there and make sure with quality. And it can help automate maybe testing and quality assurance. And the generative stuff can help you get creative about your user interface, perhaps in personalization and tasks, right, that make people more productive. I think with the agents, though, they're going to have the capability to understand a goal, right, and help you plan what needs to get done, and then orchestrate the workflow, right, against some kind of architectural design. And I think that goes to your point, perhaps, where this can really become a value, is reducing the complexity, having a more integrated platform, but still giving you the selection of tools, best of breed, things that either you have from a heritage skill perspective in your organization, or you want to infuse new capabilities. Because the agent can be that connective glue that understands what to invoke when, how to get people involved, and kind of be that layer of complexity reduction, if you will. Think of it as, it starts to augment the talent that would otherwise have to be used to get these things to work together, or to hard code how they're interfacing with each other. Let the agents figure that out, right? Because that's what they're designed to do, is understand the consequences of their actions and be able to make decisions and get things orchestrated to work together. So you may have an app development team to 5 people or 6 people, have 3 agents. The agents play the role of the coordination, if you will, and keeping everyone in sync within some kind of workflow and set of policies, right? And that obviously that's in addition to the task generation stuff that's out there today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of big NFL guy. I like to watch football and such, and so I like the agents being the quarterback. Making sure they're calling the plays and making sure things are happening. And I do think that makes a lot of sense, because I think one of the other things that I find interesting in this report that we're putting together, this research note that we're putting together, is as we see time kind of going on in 2025, we're predicting, based on our research, we find that developers are they're reporting that they're only spending 24% of their time writing code, right? And they're spending the majority of their time on ancillary tasks like designing, testing, debugging, and stakeholder meetings. And I think what you were kind of alluding to, that productivity piece, is really going to help with the adoption of automation and AI for non-coding activities. And that's going to increase that productivity. That will also give organizations that, dare I say, a competitive advantage when it comes to working with releasing that code rapidly across their SDLC, as well as whenever they're trying to push new features and functionality out the door, they need to do it at a rapid pace. I definitely like where you were going with that, and I think that there's a lot more that we unpack in that research note that we're building together here. So one other thing, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I think you're right. The table stakes right now is, the tasks, right? Automating the tasks such as code generation or quality assurance. I think where it starts really getting interesting, just think of an app dev team and like you said, a more integrated platform to operate in where they can spend more than just 24%, actually building value, right? And where I think it starts to get interesting is when you're able to understand cause and effect, or think of it as consequences of different paths, different actions, different approaches. You're then able to have the AI help explain why you're doing a certain approach versus another approach, and be able to intervene in it and say, well, what happens if I did this, or if I did that, or if the conditions change, right? And the ability to orchestrate how to do all that and plan it, and then invoke the right parts of the platform, whether it's an integrated platform or whether it is a set of tools that you want to come across and work as an integrated platform. That's where I think you go from automating tasks from pure productivity perspective to actually helping development teams make better decisions and work better as a team, and therefore have to do less of the mundane tasks, of policy and, where they can expand that 24% of actually building the value to maybe, I don't know, 30, 40, 50, 60%, right? And that's where the superpower comment comes in, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. I mean, the gains, even if it is a 5% gain, that's a significant movement in the right direction for a lot of these organizations. But I do want to touch on one piece that you did mention. This is not it doesn't have to be a huge pivot. It's a big shift, right? It's one of these things where you're meeting the client or the customer where they are in their own journey. So if a customer has a number of tools, they want to consolidate that down, that can be done over time. So this is a crawl, walk, run approach, right? Would you agree with that?
100%. I think it's incredibly progressive in its nature, and you infuse things at a pace and speed that makes sense to you. You may just want to start with one of these code generation AI assistants just to help you get started off templates and generate the code, and then you go in there. And maybe the same is true for your use case testing, quality assurance and stuff like that. You can infuse that stuff in pretty straightforward. And then when it comes to the world of the agents, maybe you just start off with one agent, and all that agent is responsible for is helping you create the actual end user interface. Or you have another agent that's going to go through and explain the process that you went through for regulatory compliance or policy, right? Or explain your testing methodology and so you can start to infuse an agent here, an agent there, an agent over here. And then over time, you can start to wire those things together, right? So that they actually collaborate together and with the human being. And then, you go a step further and say, well, I want the human to actually be able to, intervene or, interrogate the agent, say, well, is there a better way of doing this? Is what happens if I did that? And it is, I think, a very progressive roadmap where it's not like you have to rip and replace, and it's just you're infusing new capability as it makes sense over time, and you learn from it. And then, you get more sophisticated, like anything you do in life, right? The more you do it, the more you learn, and the more you can do with it. So I think it's relatively risk-free. I want to say risk-free, but it's not as high risk as it appears to be, because you can do these things incrementally. Because again, the idea is to augment the people, not to replace them. So you're not taking a massive risk, right?
Yeah, Scott, absolutely. But speaking of risks, we would be remiss to not mention DevSecOps in this conversation, right? I think if it's part of, securing the environment, security is also a big part of delivery of code, right? When we look at supply chain attacks and zero vulnerabilities, these areas that organizations are looking at. And we were predicting in our research note, and I encourage the audience to look at this research note because it really helps talk about this. But over 60% of organizations will embed DevSecOps practices as a fundamental requirement as part of their SDLC. It sounds like it should be already there, but that's not the case. And what we're seeing in the case of AI is this will, and specifically automation, this will include automating like vulnerability scanning, continuous compliance monitoring, security training across the embedded, throughout the entire CI/CD pipeline. And this is really to protect those applications in the infrastructure. What are your thoughts here, Scott, on how DevSecOps will kind of start embracing AI and using AI? I know we talked about the human in the loop, we talked about the automation piece, but I think that that's a big part of the SDLC.
Well, I think these agents are starting to be used in the IT operations world, and they're able, from an operational perspective, understand the security vulnerabilities, the anomalies, and what's different than the past with the agents is they can actually understand root cause, right? And when you understand cause, you can then or you have an effect, which is the vulnerability. Once you understand the cause of it, then you can remediate it much more quickly and then learn from it so that, it goes on. That's those kind of, decision-making intelligent agents are starting to become part of a lot of these observability and IT operations platforms. You can easily envision these agents being customized or, ones created that are for, the DevSecOps, right? Where it's more in the development cycle and it can automate the best practices on what to be looking for, what you need to code to ensure the most tight, security profile for your application. And again, the difference between an assistant that just does something versus an agent is the human's going to learn from the agent and be able to intervene from it, where a task-based thing just does it and doesn't tell you how it did it. And so then when do you trust it? Is it hallucinating? And you're not learning from it because it's not explaining what it's finding, right? It's a big black box. So I think this starting to be used and resolved in IT operations can easily be repurposed into a little bit more of a complex world, I think, which is app dev, but it's certainly the possibilities there. And it just gives, superpower intelligence to really optimizing the security profile of the applications you're building, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that, I want to touch on that a little bit because you talked about something that I think is, I guess, for my final point I want to make on this segment here is where we're going in the 2025 is we're seeing the adoption of low code and no code expansion. And we're seeing that organizations, those platforms are going to grow by 30%, over the years. And that's empowering the citizen developers. So everything you were talking about, Scott, is important, especially when you start coming out of those developer roles and those people that are focused on creating these functions within these specific guidance and guardrails. Now you have a citizen developer that you need to have even more control and governance, complex integration, as well as advanced customization across the entire organization. That's basically elevating the organization to roles where these applications are being created, right? We're seeing that this influx of applications are being created across the organization. It's going to be more and more difficult for a specific, say, the DevOps team or app dev team to develop those applications. So these application developers are going to move into the functional organizations. So I can really see a function here where AI is enforcing those governance and those integrations with those guardrails in place. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, you're right. And it is also a skill, democratization kind of thought here, getting more and more people to be able to do this, and when you think about DevSecOps, that's an incredibly complex, when you're dealing with security vulnerabilities and, essentially you're dealing with the unknown of what may come, if you use technical terminology, that's an incredibly high dimensional space, right? There could be thousands and thousands of variables and dimensions, variable layers, right? And on how to make something secure. And, again, the task-based stuff can crank through that and learn from the past And as long as your past security profile, or as long as you're happy with your future security profile being like your past, they'll do fine. But we know that's not reality, because there's always new security threats and new techniques that people are trying to use. And that's where I think these agents become really powerful, is because they're then going to be able to understand the entity relationships between different variables that could make up that high dimensional space of known as security vulnerabilities, and understand the cause and effect of how things kind of relate against them. And what it's going to do is it's going to learn and encode expertise in how to secure the code, and then empower. This goes back to the superpower thought, right? That it's going to allow, app developers that aren't security experts to be able to do more. And more importantly, I can keep coming back to this, is be able to understand why it's doing something, because it can explain it, which today's AI doesn't do a good job of doing. So I think the trick's going to be, how do you power more people to deal with the security aspects of app development without having security, gurus hanging around and PhDs that can really, you just think about AI, by the way, Paul, all the bad guys are using AI too.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
The whole security, let's call it the innovation cycle. If you're a bad guy, all the new ways to, create security, it's not even security, but, to be able to hack into something, or ransomware, or whatever it is. I mean, that's getting more sophisticated probably every week that goes by. How do you keep up with it? Humans aren't going to be able to do that as well. And those that can are too expensive, and there's not enough of them. So that's why I think these agents complement the team and the people. But again, I just don't see it replacing people. Right? It's superpowers, right? I can now do more with security than I could in the past, and I trust it because it explains itself.
Yeah, Scott, there's certainly a lot here to think about. I hope we've given the audience really a lot to kind of consider and think about. And we just touched on just the tip of the iceberg here, because there's a lot to consider with our research and our information that we have that we're sharing in our research notes. Scott, thank you for your insights. It's always a pleasure to talk to you on these discussions. It's really insightful, and your insights around AI is incredibly valuable to not just to myself, but to the audience here and to the market as well. And I want to thank the audience for attending and watching. This is there's, like we said, there's just a tip of the iceberg. There's a lot to consider. Take a look at our research note that we have. Scott and I put this together. It's in depth, and we continue to grow our research calendar for the first half and second half of 2025, and look forward to continue those conversations. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.